The March 18, 1940 clay baked by an unseasonably early sun shimmered like a mirage on rural Route 47. Inside a black 1938 Ford, Federal Agent James Mallister wiped sweat from his brow with a handkerchief already stained with the dust of Baker County. At 42, his face was a map of hard years. 12 with the Department of Justice, preceded by a youth carved in the trenches of the Great War. He'd seen smuggling rings in Chicago, broken Nazi spy cells in New York, and faced down mobsters whose eyes held nothing but calculation. But the 6 lines of shaky script on the cheap paper in his breast pocket unsettled him in a way those hardened criminals never had. At the Turner farm, 40 km south of Albany, men and women work without wages, sleep in locked barracks, are beaten if they try to leave. They don't know they're free. Said the words were a whisper of pure horror in the midst of a world at war. While America's boys fought tyranny across the oceans, this letter suggested a tyranny had never left its own soil. The farm appeared at the end of a long, lonely lane, a kingdom of isolation. A grand, 2-story house with columns weeping white paint stood sentinel on a rise. Below it, hunched like obedient beasts, were long, low wooden shacks. No activity stirred in the fields, though it was well past sun-up. The silence was profound, a living thing that swallowed sound. Mallister's knock on the farmhouse door echoed in the heavy air. The man who answered was tall, gaunt, with hair the color of old ashes and eyes like chips of winter sky. Harold Turner. He listened to Mallister's introduction with a face of carved stone. A complaint? Turner's voice was dry, rustling like dead leaves. Lies from envious folk agent. I run a lawful operation. My workers are here by contract, working off honest debts. I'd like to speak with them, verify the conditions. Turner's glacial composure didn't crack, but the temperature in the dim, musty foyer seemed to drop. Your authority ends at my front door without a warrant. This is private property. I suggest you obtain one. Mallister held his ground. Peonage is a federal crime, Mr. Turner. Holding people through fabricated debt is slavery by another name. For a fleeting second, something feral glinted in Turner's cold eyes. Are you making an accusation? I'm making an observation. And I'll be back. Leaving the house, Mallister didn't return to his car. He walked, each footfall loud in the dust, toward the nearest barracks. Let Turner try to stop him, it would be an admission. The shack's door groaned on its hinges. The stench hit him first, unwashed bodies, sickness, despair. As his eyes adjusted, he saw them. Figures huddled on rough bunks, clad in rags, their faces hollowed by a hunger that went beyond food. They stared at him not with fear, but with a vacant soul, deep exhaustion. My name is James Mallister. I'm with the federal government. I need to know if you're here by choice. A silence thick as tar. An ancient woman, her back bent like a gnarled tree root, finally spoke, her voice a rasp. We work to pay the master what we owe. Sir, how much do you owe? The master keeps the numbers. How long have you been here? A middle-aged man, all sharp angles and shadows, whispered, I was born here. So was my mama. Mallister's heart hammered against his ribs. Do you know the Civil War ended, that slavery was abolished? Confusion clouded their faces. The old woman shook her head slowly. Old Master Turner, his daddy, said them Yankee laws didn't count here in Georgia. Said we still belonged to the land. The door crashed open. Turner stood framed in sunlight, flanked by 2 hulking overseers. One cradled a shotgun casually, its barrel pointed at the dirt floor. Trespassing agent, you'll leave now, or Sheriff Perkins will escort you. Mallister scanned the room, meeting the eyes of the old woman. In their depths, he saw not hope, but a faint, dying spark of curiosity. He nodded, a silent promise, and walked past the armed men. As he drove away, the image in his rearview mirror chilled him. Harold Turner on his porch, watching him go. The man wasn't worried. He was a smug. The Atlanta office buzzed with wartime urgency, but Mallister moved in a vortex of cold, focused rage. He secured a federal warrant in record time, citing probable cause for peonage, involuntary servitude, and civil rights violations. He assembled a team 4 stone, faced deputy marshals, a seasoned medical examiner named Dr. Morrison, and Benjamin Carter, a sharp young black lawyer from the nascent NAACP Legal Defense Fund. We hit at dawn, Mallister told them, spreading a rough map of the farm on his desk, before they can hide or move anyone. 3 days later, under a cloak of pre-dawn chill, 3 cars rolled to a stop a mile from the Turner property. They approached on foot, the world silent save for the crunch of frost underfoot and the distant, lonely call of a whip-poor-will. The farm in the gray light was a ghost town. The main house stood empty, doors ajar. Turner's office, however, was a treasure trove of guilt. In a locked drawer, Mallister found the ledgers. They were works of monstrous fiction. Page after page listed names: Elijah, Sarah, Joseph, May, Louisi, next to columns of ever-inflating debt. Floor tube C. Ford few market values. Yo martits a shoe repair. The 15.5 medical treatments of fever and 50 pars. Ruthed more on board per 100 is a 100 play for one entry for a man named Thomas, age approx 22, showed a life born into arrears, debt inherited from mother Bessie to the 150, plus charges for rearing. 2080. He had worked his entire life to see that number grow to over 12,000. It's a life sentence, Benjamin Carter whispered, tracing a finger down the page. A sentence passed at birth. Dr. Morrison's call from the basement was tense. Agent, you need to see this. Below the house, in the earth-floored cellar, rusted iron rings were bolted into the stone foundation. Dark, ancient stains bloomed on the ground beneath them. The air smelled of damp and something metallic. But it was behind the last barracks that they found the truth the ledgers could only hint at. A patch of earth, roughly 20 feet square, looked different, looser, darker, devoid of the stubborn weeds that grew everywhere else. This soil's been turned over. Recently, one of the marshals noted. Dr. Morrison, his face grim, took a spade. The team dug. The silence was broken only by the sound of earth giving way. At 3 feet, the spade struck something that wasn't stone. Carefully, they brushed away the clay. A human skull stared vacantly at the Georgia sky. A large, crushing fracture marred its temple. They kept digging. More bones, 5 sets in total, commingled in a pit of anonymous suffering. Some showed healed breaks, ribs, arms. Others, like the first skull, showed the clear, violent trauma of a final moment. Mallister turned away, nausea rising. He wasn't looking at an archaeological relic. This was a modern graveyard. These were the attempted escapes, the final brutal entries in Turner's ledger. Where are they? Marshal Higgins asked, voicing the dread in all their hearts. Turner and the workers. Mallister stared at the empty barracks, then back at the hidden grave. Turner hadn't just fled, he'd been warned, and he'd taken his property with him, vanishing them into the vast, complicit silence of the rural South. The hunt, Mallister knew, had just become a race against time. For if Turner decided his property was now a liability, those 23 souls might end up in a pit much deeper than this one. For 3 agonizing days, the case became a vortex of bureaucratic energy and local stonewalling. News leaked to a crusading reporter from the Atlanta Constitution, and soon northern papers like the Chicago Defender picked up the story. Silvera in 1942 Federa Gianchmear and GOGAA. The FBI formally took over, but Mallister refused to be sidelined. He doggedly pursued Turner's network. He found cousins in Mississippi, a brother in Alabama, bank accounts quietly drained. Sheriff Wade Perkins, the fat, tobacco-chewing lawman, was arrested for conspiracy. He broke quickly in federal custody, confessing to a 58-month retainer from Turner to keep the peace and look the other way.
"I never killed nobody,"
Perkins whined. "I just didn't look too close." But Turner and the 23 had vanished like smoke. The break came on March 28th late at night. The phone on Mallister's desk jangled, sharp in the quiet office. He picked up. "Mallister." Silence, then the faint sound of Rag breathing. A voice, ancient and trembling, woven from fragility and immense courage, came down the line. "Old Miller Barn, Route 6, north of the Turner place, 15 mile out. Who is this? Are the people there?" A sob choked the line. "Hurry. He ain't left us no water." Click. Mallister moved. He and his marshals covered the 15 miles of dark country roads in under 20 minutes, headlights cutting like sabers through the night. The Miller barn was a sagging skeleton of timber, half collapsed, seemingly forgotten by time. But behind it, mostly hidden by a collapsed hayrick, was a Turner farm truck. Guns drawn, they entered. The interior was frigid, smelling of rot and pigeon droppings. Then, from a boarded-up grain storage bin at the back, they heard a weak, collective moaning, the sound of life ebbing away. They pried off the boards. The scene was one of pure, calculated cruelty. 23 men, women, and children were crammed into the dark, airless space. They lay on the filthy floor, too weak to stand, their lips cracked, eyes sunken. Turner hadn't just hidden them, he'd imprisoned them here to die of thirst and exposure, erasing the evidence. "Medics! Now!" Mallister roared, helping a marshal gently lift a young woman who weighed next to nothing. As the Albany paramedics arrived and began the work of salvation, Sips of water, warm blankets, gentle words. Mallister knelt beside the oldest of them, the woman from the barracks. She was being treated for severe dehydration, but her eyes were open, clear, and fixed on him. "May Louise," she whispered. "My name is May Louise Williams. You made the call," Mallister said, not a question. A tear traced a path through the dust on her wrinkled cheek. "Thomas, the boy who ran, he saw the free world. He told us before they killed him. Said I had to tell. I'm old. Got nothing left to fear from Master Turner." She gripped Mallister's hand with a surprising strength. Her other hand moved to her side, and with a painstaking effort she pulled a small, folded square of newsprint from a hidden seam in her ragged dress. It was a months-old clipping from the Albany Herald, showing a parade of black soldiers in uniform, heading off to war. She had saved it, a stolen glimpse of a reality she'd been told was a lie. "He said we was slaves," she said, her voice gaining strength with her anger. "Said the law said so. But these are our boys fighting. They ain't slaves." She looked at Mallister, her gaze piercing. "Was he lying, sir? Was he lying my whole life?" James Mallister, a veteran of war and a witness to every shade of human darkness, felt his own eyes burn. He covered her fragile hand with both of his. "Yes, May Louise. He was lying. You were born free. You have always been free." And for the first time, in the flashing lights of the ambulances, surrounded by the murmurs of rescue, May Louise Williams began to weep, not with sorrow, but with a storm of 77 years of grief, rage, and the first, fragile tremors of a truth she could finally claim as her own. In the clean, sunlit ward of the Albany Hospital, the survivors began the slow, painful journey back to personhood. Their bodies, treated for malnutrition, parasites, and injuries old and new, told a history America had refused to see. Dr. Morrison, his professional detachment shattered, documented the evidence. He called Mallister and Benjamin Carter to a private room. "It's systematic," the doctor said, his voice hollow. He pointed to photographs and X-rays. "This woman, Sarah, the bones in her left hand were shattered and healed incorrectly, likely from a hammer or similar tool, a punishment a decade ago. This man, Joseph, has scars consistent with repeated lashings from a bull whip, but this..." He held up an X-ray of an elderly man's shoulder. "See this dense, linear shadow on the scapula?" Mallister leaned in. It was the clear, unmistakable shape of the letter. "It's a brand," Dr. Morrison said. "Done with a hot iron, probably in his childhood. Cattle are branded Agent Mallister. These people were marked as permanent property." Benjamin Carter turned away, pressing a fist to his mouth. May Louise, growing stronger by the day, became their guide to the farm's hidden history. With Mallister and Carter listening, she painted a picture of a world frozen in 1859. The old master, Ezekiel, he kept talking about the war of northern aggression like it was yesterday, she said, her voice steady. Said the Yankees lost where it mattered. Said our freedom papers were just more of their tricks. We had no radios, no papers that could read. The only world was the farm. The overseer's guns were the law. The whip was the judge. She spoke of the silent years. Times when someone would try to run, or protest, or simply break under the strain, they would be taken to the cellar. Sometimes they returned broken in spirit. Sometimes they didn't. Would ask. May Louise whispered. Master Harold would say they'd been sold down south to settle their debt. We thought there was just more of this, everywhere. The catalyst for the anonymous letter was Thomas, a young man of 22 with a fire in his eyes the Turners couldn't extinguish. He'd escaped one night, made it to Albany, and hidden for 2 days, watching black men and women conduct business, drive cars, laugh openly. He saw a U.S. Army recruitment poster featuring a black soldier. He was captured, dragged back by Sheriff Perkins himself, and beaten savagely in the yard as a lesson. But before he died, May Louise said, her eyes shining with tears of pride, told us. He told us all he saw. He said, Mama May, it's a whole world out there, and we ain't slaves in it. They killed him for that truth. Buried him out back. That's when I knew I had to get the truth out, for I took it to my own grave. Harold Turner was captured 2 weeks later, not in Mexico, but in a comfortable hunting lodge owned by a business associate in the Louisiana bayou. He was drinking bourbon and complaining about federal overreach. He offered no resistance, only a contemptuous sneer. I was running a business, providing for a shiftless lot who'd starve without me. I'm a patriot, not a criminal. At his arraignment, as the charges, peonage, kidnapping, 5 counts of murder, were red. Turner's mask finally slipped. He wasn't a calculating businessman in that moment. He was the embodiment of a dying, vicious ideology. He glared across the courtroom at May Louise, who sat dignified and still in a new dress. "You," he spat, his voice trembling with rage. "After all I provided, you're nothing without my land." May Louise met his gaze and did not look away. For the first time in 84 years, she was not afraid. She simply said, loud enough for the entire court to hear, "I am a child of God. You are just a man who got caught." The gavel rapped, but the real verdict had already been delivered in that exchange. The trial was a national sensation, a stark, ugly spotlight on the South's hidden wound. Harold Turner was convicted on all counts. The judge, a stern old man from South Carolina, pronounced 5 consecutive life sentences. "Your farm was not a business, Mr. Turner. It was a tomb for the human spirit. You sought to bury the 13th Amendment alongside your victims. Today, justice ensures you will be the one entombed." Turner died in prison in 1957, unrepentant. For the survivors, freedom was a new language they had to learn. The federal government provided modest reparations and assistance. Benjamin Carter helped them navigate the bewildering world of bank accounts, leases, and rights they never knew they possessed. May Louise Williams moved into a small, tidy house in Albany. She learned to read, her gnarled finger tracing the shapes of letters in children's primers. She planted a garden of marigolds and tomatoes, things of beauty and nourishment that belonged solely to her. In 1948, she voted for the first time, her hand steady as she marked the ballot, defying the ghosts of every Turner who had told her she was less than human. She became a quiet force, testifying before a congressional committee on civil rights, her simple, powerful words silencing cynical politicians. She met James Mallister for lunch every year on the anniversary of March 18th. They spoke not just of the past but of the present, of the ongoing fight for equality, of the Korean War, of the rising tide of change. On one such occasion in 1957, Mallister, his own hair now gray, asked her, "May Louise, after all those years, how do you bear the weight of it? The stolen time?" She sipped her tea, looking out at her blooming marigolds. "The weight ain't in the years they took, Mr. James. The weight was in the lie. Carrying the belief that I was less than a person, that was the heavy burden. Knowing the truth, even if it came late, that's what set me down, these last years." She smiled, a rare, radiant expression that smoothed the lines of her face. "These years are light as a feather. I'm living them for all the ones in that pit, for Thomas, for my mama. Every sunrise is a gift they was robbed of." James Mallister retired in 1963. The photo he kept on his desk wasn't from the trial or the rescue. It was a snapshot taken in May Louise's garden in 1950. She stood tall amidst the flowers, her face turned toward the sun, a Bible in her hands. She wasn't smiling in the picture, but her entire being seemed to radiate a hard-won, unshakable peace. It was the portrait of a soul that had endured hell and chosen, fiercely, to embrace heaven instead. May Louise Williams passed in her sleep on a cold January night in 1958, 1 month after her 100th birthday. She was buried in the Albany Cemetery, next to the 5 recovered victims from the Turner farm, who now had proper headstones. Her epitaph read as May Louise Williams, 1858-1958, born into bondage, she lived to claim her freedom, and with it, her mighty soul. James Mallister attended the funeral, as did Benjamin Carter and a few of the other survivors, now aging but free. Her will contained a letter, read aloud by her lawyer. In it, she left her small house to a fund for black children's education and offered a final testament. "Do not remember me with pity. Remember the Turners with vigilance. My first life was stolen by a man with a whip and a ledger. But my second life was saved by a man with a badge and a conscience, and by a boy named Thomas who ran toward truth. Evil lives where good people choose not to see. Be the ones who see. Be the ones who look into the dark corners, who listen to the whispers in the dust. Freedom is a garden. It must be tended every single day, or the weeds will take it back." The Turner farm itself became a haunted place. The main house was demolished. The land, said to be cursed, passed through indifferent hands. Locals told stories of hearing cries on the wind, of seeing shadowy figures in the overgrown fields at dusk. Developers in the 1980s abandoned plans for a subdivision after workers reported unbearable feelings of dread and unease. Perhaps it was superstition, or perhaps some ground, steeped in innocent blood and profound suffering, refuses to be forgotten. Mallister, in his final years, gave an interview for a documentary. Frail but sharp, he stared into the camera, his eyes holding the ghost of that 1942 barracks. "We tell ourselves a tidy story, he said. That slavery ended with a proclamation, a war and amendment. We draw a clean line between then and now. The Turner Farm proves that line is a fiction. Slavery didn't end, it retreated. It hid in blind valleys, behind threats and lies, in the ledgers of men who saw human beings as columns of debt. The greatest weapon the Turners had wasn't the whip. It was the isolation. It was the manufactured ignorance. They don't know they're free. That is the most devastating sentence I have ever heard. He paused, collecting himself. The fight is never over. It just changes its name, its face. It's in the company town, the trafficked person, the system designed to keep the powerless in their place. The lesson of May Louise isn't about a past horror. It's a warning for tomorrow. Look, listen. And when you see that lie, have the courage to speak the truth, however small your voice may seem. The James Mallister died in 1974. The photo of May Louise in her garden was found on his bedside table. It now resides in the National Archives, a testament to resilience and a stark receipt for a debt this nation can never fully repay. The memorial at the site of the Turner Farm is simple, a slab of black granite listing the 23 survivors and the 5 murdered. The inscription, by Bentid BNGP's Kitate AS Pirati Ugiobi AFTR Fidum was Tishel
Edano Servitude TR Star Raminidest.
Origi Popiari S Hodaru Tiashua Urage Upu Ichol DIT and Iver Miu Hor Iregi. If this story of hidden history and resilient spirit moved you, sari it so others remember. For more forgotten chapters of history, subscribe to Tales of Slavery and join us in bringing the past to light.